On the day I went into labor, my husband's female deputy had all the military physicians transferred away on the pretext of a recurrence of her old wounds. Watching the blood spreading beneath me, I clung desperately to his sleeve. Pei Zhiheng, please send for a doctor at once. If my parents find out about this, you will not live to see another day. For 3 years of our marriage, Pei Zhiheng had never known that not a single member of my family was normal. There was my father, the eunuch marquis, my mother, the unhinged madwoman, and my brother, the deranged Yanda. Since I was a child, they had drilled it into my head: anyone who dared to hurt me would be torn limb from limb, their bones ground into medicine, their flesh fed to the dogs. But he did not believe me. He merely frowned and wrenched his sleeve free from my grasp, still spinning lies. The war is at a critical juncture now. Even the emperor shows me deference. What can your family possibly do to me? Last time you prattled on about putting the greater good first, letting the military physicians tend to the wounded soldiers instead of sparing even one to treat Wanwan's insect bites. Now you finally know fear. Wanwan's hands are meant to wield swords and slay enemies. What are your hands good for besides weaving lies? He leaned down, every word dripping with ice-cold contempt. Since you are so eager to prioritize the greater good, then wait for the military physicians to return before you give birth. As the tent flap fell shut behind him, excruciating pain racked my abdomen. Trembling violently, I fumbled for the bone whistle my father had given me, and blew it with the last of my strength. The shrill, piercing sound cut through the military camp like a blade. Pei Zhiheng had no idea that when this whistle sounded, it would not be mortal men who answered the call, it would be demons straight out of the underworld. After Pei Zhiheng left, carrying Wanwan in his arms, I croaked out a hoarse plea for a military physician, but no one answered. Blood streamed down my legs, soaking through my undergarments completely. I clung to the last vestiges of my strength, dragging my blooded body toward the tent entrance. Pei Zhiheng's deputy stood guard at the door, unmoving. The general has ordered all military physicians to wait on Miss Shen, he said flatly. Not one of them is permitted to leave her side. I pointed at the dark red pool of blood beneath me, my voice shaking so violently I could barely form the words. Can't you see I'm dying? This is the general's child. Are you going to watch me die along with it? The deputy averted his gaze, his tone cold and unyielding. Military orders are absolute. A bone-deep chill swept over me, freezing my heart solid. Of course, without Pei Zhiheng's explicit command, how dare they disobey? I squeezed my eyes shut, then spoke again. My voice so low I could barely hear it myself. Then, help me send for Pei Zhiheng. Tell him I'm dying. Ask him to come back for one last look, please. The words tasted like ash in my mouth, so humiliating I wanted to laugh at my own patheticness. Sure enough, the deputy laughed, a cold, mocking sound laced with pity. Madam, are you truly that naive, or are you just pretending to be? Miss Shen's old wounds flared up. She's in excruciating pain. The general is staying by her side every single second of the day. Do you really think he would abandon her to come see you? Every word was like a needle piercing my heart. Why would Pei Zhiheng come? He was with the woman who held his heart. I opened my mouth, wanting to say something more, but my vision went black in an instant, and I lost consciousness completely. Too. I had a long, vivid dream. In the dream, my father was obsessed with adorning his spear. The tassel hanging from its tip was strung not with beads, but with human eyeballs. He called it his trophy gourd, saying it needed to be replenished often. His favorite pastime was dragging me along to study other people's heads, picking out the best ones to add to his collection. As for my mother, she spent every day meticulously polishing the wine cups she had crafted from the skulls of various handsome men. Her days were spent either peddling her newly made skull cups or bragging about her latest batch of infused wine. But the most terrifying of all was my brother. Every year, he would make a human skin coat for me, claiming it was practice for the day he would craft a fur coat fit for his future sister-in-law. I was still young back then. Every time my family stepped out in public, the other children would scatter, refusing to play with me. It was Pei Zhiheng who always stayed by my side. Patient and kind, he would take me to the market, watch the lantern shows with me, buy me sugar figurines shaped like rabbits, Many young ladies from noble families had their eyes on him. Once, the spoiled daughter of the Minister of War blocked our path, her voice shrill with jealousy. Pei Zhiheng, what benefits has Su Qingying given you? I can give you even more. From now on, you can only play with me. You're not allowed to take her anywhere. I was timid and insecure back then, convinced he would leave me for the minister's daughter, but to my surprise, Pei Zhiheng tightened his grip on my hand, his voice firm and unwavering. She hasn't given me any benefits. If anything, it's me who begged for the chance to be with her. The sunlight that day was warm and golden, gilding the tips of his ears, turning them a faint shade of pink. Later, Pei Zhiheng exchanged his illustrious military achievements for an imperial edict of marriage. Yet he still insisted on kneeling before my family, swearing a solemn oath, I will spend the rest of my life treating Qingqing well, I will be faithful to her and her alone, I will love her, cherish her, protect her, and never betray her. So I followed him without hesitation to the bitter cold of Jiao Pass, staying by his side for 6 long years. Countless times, he had pulled me into his arms, his voice choked with emotion. My poor Qingqing, you've suffered so much for me. He exchanged all the imperial rewards he received for exquisite jewelry and hairpins for me. He used his military merits to secure one noble title after another for me, until I became the most honored lady in the entire realm. He told me, over and over again, that all his glory and achievements were meant to be shared with me. But then, the young general who had sworn never to betray me, the husband who had once cherished me more than his own life, for the sake of another woman. He had withdrawn every single military physician at the most dangerous moment of my labor. My child, I jolted awake with a gasp, the searing pain in my abdomen crashing over me like a tidal wave once more. The blood was still flowing, the sheets beneath me cold and sticky with it, hatred and agony intertwined, burning through my veins, yet somehow clearing my mind a little. I turned my head with great difficulty, my voice hoarse and weak. Deputy, you were the one I brought to Pei Zhiheng from the Marquis's mansion. You of all people should know what the Marquis's mansion is truly like. The color drained from the deputy's face in an instant, leaving it ashen white. He took an involuntary step forward, his voice dry and cracking with fear. What are you trying to say? My parents and my brother, they will arrive at Jiao Pass within the next 2 days, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I forced a smile, a wretched, bloodless thing, staring straight into his wide, terrified eyes. Tell me, what do you think will happen to everyone in this general's mansion when they see me like this? Every last trace of color vanished from the deputy's face. Even his lips began to tremble uncontrollably. After all these years, the only outsiders who knew the true horrors of the Marquis's mansion were probably the emperor. And him, the man who had left the mansion to serve under Pei Zhiheng. Are the Marquis and the others really coming? When will they arrive? Does the general know about this? He bombarded me with frantic questions, his panic so palpable it hung thick in the air. I did not answer. Instead, I closed my eyes, exhaustion weighing heavily on my eyelids. Right now, go find me a midwife. If you do, I might be able to put in a good word for you when they arrive. If not, I did not finish the sentence, but the deputy was already trembling like a leaf in a storm. He turned on his heel and ran out of the tent as fast as his legs could carry him. I let out a faint breath of relief, collapsing back onto the bed, too weak even to cry. #3. The deputy returned in record time, dragging a midwife along with him. The midwife rushed to the bed, her eyes widening in horror as she took in the blood-soaked sheets and my deathly pale face. She pressed a hand to my abdomen, and her face turned ashen. Your amniotic fluid has long since broken. You've lost almost all your blood. The baby's heartbeat is so faint I can barely detect it. Hurry, prepare plenty of hot water, clean cloths. Bring me some ginseng slices for her to suck on. She needs to hold on to her life force. She pressed down hard on my abdomen, trying to reposition the baby, her voice urgent and fraught with panic. Madam, we can't afford to waste any more time. I'm going to deliver this baby right now. The ginseng slices were stuffed into my mouth, their bitter, invigorating taste clearing my foggy mind slightly. The midwife was here. There might still be hope for my child. But just as the midwife was about to start, Shenwanru's mother barged into the tent, shoving her roughly aside. My daughter's old wounds have flared up. She's in unbearable pain. Her life is the one truly in danger. The general has given his orders. All doctors are to prioritize Wanwan's treatment. Who do you lowly wretches think you are, daring to hoard a doctor for yourselves? She strode over to the bed, her nose wrinkling in disgust as she looked down at me, covered in blood and sweat. Su Qingying, do you really think you're still the spoiled young lady of the Marquis's mansion who can get whatever she wants? It's your sickly, simpering act that has bewitched the general, making my poor Wanwan suffer all these grievances. Today, in Wanwan's name and in the general's name, I'm going to teach you a lesson in respect. The deputy paled with fright. Stepping forward hastily, Madam really will die if this continues. When the Marquis arrives and demands an explanation, Xinjiang sneered, signaling to her servants to pin me down. She pulled a cloth pouch filled with glinting silver needles from her sleeve. When the Marquis gets here, he'll find his daughter died from a difficult labor. What does that have to do with us? Giving birth is painful for every woman. What makes you so special? All this screaming and wailing. Do you want the entire Jiao to hear how spoiled and delicate the general's wife is? I have an old remedy for this kind of delicacy. I stared at the silver needles glinting coldly in her hand, shaking my head in terror. Xinjiang's eyes turned cold and cruel. She aimed a needle at an acupoint on my abdomen and drove it straight in. A sharp, searing pain shot through me, making my entire body convulse violently. Then came a second needle, a third, with each needle that pierced my skin. It felt as if thousands of ants were gnawing at my bones from the inside out. I was soaked in sweat from the agony, my voice a ragged, broken scream. If Pei Zhiheng finds out about this, he will never let you get away with it. Xinjiang's hand paused for a split second, then she laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that dripped with sarcasm. She was about to drive another needle into my skin when a horrified shout rang out from behind her. Ching ching, hash 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 4. The urgent cry cut through Xinjiang's sneer, her face twisting with shock. When Pei Zhiheng saw me, his steps froze abruptly, his eyes widening in horror. I lay on the bed, my body pierced by countless glinting silver needles. The sheets beneath me stained a dark, gruesome brown with blood. As he stared at the needles protruding from my body and the horrific pool of blood, his face grew darker and darker, his jaw tightening with rage. How dare you, he roared, his voice thunderous with fury. Who gave you the right to treat her like this? The maids in the room fell to their knees, trembling like leaves, their faces ashen with fear. Seeing this, Shenwanru knelt down slowly as well, her delicate face pale and tear-streaked, her eyes brimming with a mixture of stubbornness and forced resignation. General, please punish me. It's all my fault. I tried to stop Mother. But, Mother saw how Madam has been bullying and abusing me all this time, even when she came to visit me. Madam had her beaten. She was just so angry she lost her senses and did something foolish. As she spoke, she gently tugged at her mother's sleeve, revealing several faint, old scars on her arm. The look in Pei Zhiheng's eyes turned icy cold as he glared at me, his gaze filled with bitter disappointment. So this is how you've been treating them behind my back, Su Qingying. I thought you were merely spoiled and willful, but I never imagined your heart could be this petty and vicious. His words were like a bucket of cold water, dousing the last flicker of hope in my heart completely. Pei Zhiheng paused for a moment, then spoke again, his voice cold and final. That said, this incident did not happen without cause. Since you have wronged them, you deserve this lesson to teach you some humility. Whatever punishment Wanwan decides on is only what you have earned. I stared at Pei Zhiheng in stunned disbelief. For a trumped-up charge. He was willing to punish me at the most critical moment of my labor, all for Shenwanru's mother. Before I could open my mouth to retort, Shenwanru spoke up, her voice soft and timid. I once heard of an old folk remedy. It's a bit painful, but it will help calm Madam down so she can focus on giving birth. These little creatures love the smell of blood. If we place them on Madam's body, they'll burrow into the right spots on their own. They'll block the agitated energy and help Madam stay calm. With that, Shenwanru gestured to a soldier, who stepped forward carrying a clay jar writhing with countless tiny corpse-eating insects. There were also several slimy black leeches squirming inside. I struggled against my restraints, screaming in terror and despair, "That's our child, your flesh and blood. You can't do this to me." Pei Zhiheng stared at the jar of insects, a flicker of discomfort and hesitation crossing his face. Shen Wanru immediately clung to his arm, her eyes brimming with tears. Her voice soft and pleading. "General, all the military physicians are right outside. They won't let anything happen to the baby. Think of this as Madam making amends to Mother and me for all the wrongs she's done. Please." The emotions in Pei Zhiheng's eyes warred fiercely: love for Shen Wanru, loyalty to his oath, and a flicker of guilt for me. In the end, he lowered his eyes, refusing to look at me any longer. A triumphant smirk flickered across Shen Wanru's face for a split second. Then she picked up a pair of chopsticks, skewering one of the writhing black leeches. "No, get away from me," I screamed. Thrashing wildly against my bonds, "Father, mother, brother," I screamed in utter despair, tears mixing with the blood streaming down my body. That cold, slimy touch drew closer and closer. Just as the writhing creature was about to brush against my skin, the door was kicked off its hinges with a deafening crash. My father was the first to storm in, brandishing his terrifying spear. The tip glinted coldly in the light, and the shaft was strung with a ghastly row of human heads. Like a macabre necklace of trophies, his gaze swept over the jar of insects in Shen Wanru's trembling hands, then to Pei Zhiheng, frozen in shock. Finally, it landed on me, broken, trembling, on the brink of death. Father cracked a wide, bone-chilling grin. "Perfect. It looks like I'll be able to replace my necklace with a brand new set of trophies today." Close on his heels, Mother smiled sweetly at Pei Zhiheng, her voice dripping with honeyed malice. "I've always told our little Qingying pretty men are far more reliable when they're turned into skull wine cups." My brother sauntered in slowly, his eyes fixed on Shen Wanru as he circled her, examining her with the meticulous gaze of a tailor inspecting fabric. "I'm going to make a new coat," he murmured softly. #5. The moment Father's words left his mouth, the room fell so silent you could hear a pin drop. Shen Jiang's face turned as white as a sheet, her legs buckled, and she collapsed to the floor in a dead faint. Pei Zhiheng froze too, staring at the three figures in the doorway, the abnormal family members I'd often spoken of as a child. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but only managed to croak out, "Father-in-law, why are you all here?" Father drove the butt of his spear into the ground with a resounding thud. The severed heads strung along the shaft clacked against each other, a dry, rattling sound that sent shivers down everyone's spine. "My daughter is giving birth. Isn't it only right that her father should be here?" His eyes raked over the countless silver needles protruding from my body, then locked onto Pei Zhiheng. He smiled, a cold, sharp smile that bared his white teeth. "General Pei, what kind of new game is my daughter playing here?" Mother had already sashayed over to the bed. Her hips swaying, she was dressed in a deep crimson dress, her wrists adorned with bracelets carved from human bones. She extended her fingers, painted a blood-red hue with nail polish, and brushed the sweat from my cheek. She sniffed her fingers delicately, then frowned her delicate brows. She turned to stare at Shen Wanru and her mother, who were rooted to the spot, their faces drained of all color. Her eyes lit up with interest as they fell on the jar of writhing insects. "Did you too bring these little toys?" Shen Wanru shrank back, as if Mother's gaze alone could burn holes through her skin. My brother knelt down, his eyes tracing the contours of her face, then her neck. Every now and then, he would hold up a finger, measuring the distance between her jawline and collarbone as if he were sketching an invisible pattern in the air. "Her skin is passable," he murmured, his voice low and thoughtful. "The texture is fairly even, if I skin her properly. It should make a decent collar." "Ah!" Shen Wanru let out a blood-curdling scream, scurrying behind Pei Zhiheng for cover. It was only then that Pei Zhiheng seemed to snap out of his daze. He stepped forward, placing himself between my brother and Shen Wanru, his face dark with anger. "Brother Jiang, show some respect." "Respect?" My brother straightened up, tilting his head to the side as if he didn't quite understand the word. "I'm just looking at the fabric, you're blocking my light." "Father-in-law, mother-in-law, brother," Pei Zhiheng raised his voice, trying to assert the authority of a general. This is all a misunderstanding. Qingying is having a difficult labor. Mrs. Shen was just anxious and resorted to some folk remedies. Folk remedies, father cut him off, swinging his spear and sending the clay jar flying. The spear tip hovered over the writhing mass of insects on the floor. You call these disgusting things a folk remedy, Pei Zhiheng? I was already cutting off men's heads on the battlefield when you were still running around in diapers. Do you take me for a blind man? H. He advanced on Pei Zhiheng, step by step. The metal plates of his armor clanked loudly with every movement. With each step he took, the maids and servants in the room trembled harder. A misunderstanding. Father stopped right in front of Pei Zhiheng. He towered over him by half a head, casting the general in a deep, menacing shadow. All I see is my daughter, the rightful lady of the general's mansion, the Princess of Tranquility, appointed by the Emperor's own edict, being reduced to this half-dead state by you, the little whore hiding behind you, and this old hag. He jabbed the spear tip toward Xinjiang. All of you. Yes, father-in-law. Please listen to my explanation. Cold sweat beaded on Pei Zhiheng's forehead. Explanation. My ass. Father roared so loudly the dust shook loose from the ceiling beams, showering everyone below. Deputy, get your ass in here. The deputy, who had been cowering by the door, his face ashen, stumbled in and fell to his knees with a loud thud. Marquis, speak. Tell me everything. Not one single detail is to be omitted. The deputy was so terrified he could barely breathe. He spilled everything, talking so fast it was like emptying the contents of a bamboo tube in one go. He told father how Pei Zhiheng had ordered all the military physicians to leave and tend to Shenhuanru. He recounted every single thing that had happened from that moment until they arrived. By the end of his tale, he was kowtowing so frantically his forehead was covered in bruises. Spare me, Marquis, spare my life. I sent for a midwife afterward. I really did. It's just that, that's enough. Father cut him off, turning to face Pei Zhiheng once more. His voice was eerily calm as he asked. Pei Zhiheng, what did you promise me when I handed my daughter over to you? Pei Zhiheng's face was deathly pale, his lips moved, but no sound came out. You said, father continued, speaking for him, that you would be faithful to her and her alone, that you would love her, protect her, and never betray her. He nodded slowly, a cold, humorless smile playing on his lips. Good, very good. It hasn't even been that many years, has it? Is this how you love her? Is this how you protect her? Allowing her to be stabbed full of needles by some random woman's mother in your own mansion, allowing her to be almost force-fed a jar of maggots. Father-in-law, don't call me father-in-law. Father suddenly raised his hand. With a swift, precise movement, he drove the spear tip straight into Pei Zhiheng's shoulder. He stepped back, a satisfied grin spreading across his face as he examined his handiwork. He tapped his chin thoughtfully, as if he were appraising a valuable piece of art. I wonder if General Pei's head would be worthy enough to hang on my spear. #6. The moment father's words hung in the air, Pei Zhiheng's face turned ashen. He was no stranger to bloodshed. He had fought his way out of countless battlefields over the past 6 years at Jiao Pass, wading through mountains of corpses and rivers of blood. But when father looked at him with that cold, appraising gaze, as if he were nothing more than an object to be evaluated for its quality, a bone-deep chill shot up Pei Zhiheng's spine, freezing him to the core. Jiang Tianding, father. Two voices rang out in unison, both tinged with annoyance. Mother called out to father, her voice sharp with irritation. Are you trying to steal this head from me? My brother was even more displeased, clicking his tongue in annoyance. You've ruined him. He's not perfect anymore. With that, he stepped forward, pulled the spear out of Pei Zhiheng's shoulder, and drove it straight into the other shoulder with a sickening squelch. He leaned in, examining the wounds closely for a long moment, then nodded in satisfaction. There, now he looks much better. Pei Zhiheng's limbs went cold with terror. The way they looked at him made him want to shrink into the ground and disappear. It wasn't the bloodthirsty, kill or be killed aura of the battlefield. It was something far more chilling, a cold, detached curiosity, like the way a human might look at a farm animal before slaughtering it for meat. Pei Zhiheng straightened his back, trying to maintain the last shreds of his dignity as a general. What happened today is my fault. I failed to manage my household properly, causing Qingying to suffer this grievance. But please, father-in-law and mother-in-law, for Qingying's sake. As she still needs urgent medical attention, let the military physicians. Mother suddenly let out a soft, tinkling laugh, cutting him off mid-sentence. She had sat down beside my bed, a small, sharp silver knife in her hand. She was carefully pulling the silver needles out of my body one by one. Her movements were gentle and precise, her gaze so focused it was as if she were carving a delicate work of art. My daughter, she said, her voice soft and sweet, will be treated by me. I don't need the quacks from your general's mansion. She lifted her eyes, her gaze drifting from Pei Zhiheng to Shen Wanru, who was still cowering behind him, trembling like a leaf in the wind. Finally, she reached out and stroked my face tenderly, letting out a soft sigh. My poor little Qingying, you've always been too stubborn for your own good. I've told you time and time again, pretty men are never to be trusted. It would have been far better to turn him into a skull wine cup. Not only would he belong to you forever, but you could also drink from him whenever you pleased. The regret in her voice was so genuine it sent a wave of terror through everyone in the room. Yet despite my pale, bloodless face, a genuine smile spread across my lips. Pei Zhiheng's scalp went numb. He took an involuntary step forward, shielding Shen Wanru behind him once more. By this point, my brother had lost interest in Shen Wanru. He squatted down beside Xinjiang, who had collapsed to the floor in a dead faint, and shook his head slowly, a look of distaste on his face. Her skin is too old and loose, it's dull and lacks elasticity. Xinjiang let out a soft moan, as if she were grateful for this verdict, thinking she had escaped her fate. But in the next second, my brother pulled a small, sharp skinning knife out of nowhere. In one swift, effortless motion, he skinned a large patch of skin from her chest. It might be passable for soaking in medicinal wine, he muttered, tossing the piece of skin onto the floor in disgust. Or perhaps it can be used as a doormat, if I'm feeling generous. The combination of excruciating pain and sheer terror was too much for Xinjiang. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she fainted completely. Mother, Shen Wanru let out a horrified scream, trying to lunge forward to save her mother, but Pei Zhiheng held her back tightly. That's enough, Pei Zhiheng roared, his voice cracking with rage. Mrs. Shen may have made a mistake, but she doesn't deserve to die for it. You're going too far. Father let out a loud, booming laugh, as if he just heard the funniest joke in the world. He picked up his spear and walked over to the unconscious Xinjiang. He prodded her head with the shaft of the spear, as if she were nothing more than a sack of potatoes. When this old hag was stabbing my daughter full of needles, he said, his voice cold and mocking. Did she stop to think that my daughter didn't deserve to die? He looked up, his eyes locking onto Pei Zhiheng's. And what about you, Pei Zhiheng? When you ordered all the military physicians to leave, did you stop to think that your wife and your unborn child might die? Pei Zhiheng was lost for words. Every last trace of color drained from his face. You didn't think about it at all, Father answered for him, his voice calm and deadly. Your mind was so full of your precious Miss Wanru that you didn't spare a single thought for anyone else. As for my daughter and my grandson, if they died, it would have just been their bad luck. Isn't that right? That's not true. I didn't mean for this to happen, Pei Zhiheng shouted, his eyes bloodshot with rage and desperation. I just wanted her to wait. I just wanted to teach her a lesson, to make her behave. Father nodded slowly, a cold smile playing on his lips. What a convenient excuse. He raised his voice, shouting toward the door, bring them in. A group of soldiers from the Marquis's mansion marched in, dragging several people behind them. Leading the group was the steward of the general's mansion. Behind him were the military physicians who had been ordered to tend to Shen Wanru. The moment they stepped into the room, they collapsed to their knees, trembling violently. Spare us, Marquis, spare our lives. The steward was the first to break down, tears streaming down his face. I may be Shen Wanru's father, but I'm only her stepfather. I've even beaten that woman before. There must still be old scars on her arms. I swear I've never done anything to harm the young lady. I only took a little of her money on Shen Wanru's orders. The steward spilled everything, how Shen Wanru had ordered them to keep a close eye on the courtyard, forbidding anyone from helping me. How she had subtly hinted that they should teach me a lesson. The military physicians, seeing which way the wind was blowing, burst into tears as well. They immediately confessed that they had lied about Shen Wanru's old wounds in exchange for bribes. Every time Shen Wanru had claimed her old wounds were acting up, it had actually just been a few insect bites. Last time, she had made such a fuss about it that she almost delayed the treatment of wounded soldiers. It was me who had stepped in to stop her, and that was why Shen Wanru had held a grudge against me, plotting this entire scheme to get her revenge. One by one, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The truth was laid bare for all to see. Pei Zhiheng listened in stunned silence. His expression shifted from shock to disbelief, then to confusion, until finally, his face turned as white as a sheet. Slowly, agonizingly, he turned his head to look at Shen Wanru, who was still hiding behind him. "Wanwan," he whispered, his voice so dry it was barely audible, "is what they're saying true?" #7. The fragile, innocent look on Shen Wanru's face shattered completely. Her eyes darted about in panic, her lips trembling violently. "It's not true. They're lying. I didn't do it. I didn't. Mother didn't do it either. She was only trying to help the madam. It's all these servants spreading lies, lying." Mother had finished pulling out all the needles and was sprinkling medicinal powder over my wounds. She didn't even look up at Shen Wanru, letting out a soft, mocking laugh. "The needles your mother stuck into my daughter are called *** sterility needles ***. They target acupoints directly related to a woman's ability to conceive and bear children. At best, they leave their victim paralyzed. At worst, they cause fatal hemorrhaging, and the worst part is, they leave almost no trace. Any doctor would mistake the symptoms for postnatal weakness that simply can't be cured. This technique is something only the witch doctors of the Chong barbarians would use." She paused, finally lifting her eyes to fix Shen Wanru with a cold, piercing gaze. "As for that jar of corpse-eating leeches, once they burrow into a person's body, they wriggle straight into the internal organs, feasting on blood, essence, and marrow. From the outside, the victim might still look alive, but inside, their organs are already rotting away. These things ordinary people wouldn't even dare to speak of them, let alone use them. You and your mother really went to an awful lot of trouble just to get rid of my daughter." Shen Wanru was rendered completely speechless. Her body swayed violently, and she barely managed to stay on her feet. Pei Zhiheng was no fool. Even if he still wanted to deny the truth, he could no longer ignore what was right in front of his eyes. He stared at Shen Wanru. His eyes filled with a cold, burning rage, his voice so hoarse it was barely recognizable. "I treated you with nothing but kindness. Qingqing never once made things difficult for you. Why would you do this? Why?" Shen Wanru seemed to be ignited by those two words. All the pretense of fragility and gentleness vanished from her face, replaced by a twisted, venomous madness. "Yes, you gave me fine clothes and delicious food. You gave me the empty title of Deputy General, but what then?" She pointed a trembling finger at me, screaming at the top of her lungs. "I followed you to Jiao Pass and endured 6 years of wind and sand. I braved every danger by your side. But what about her? She stayed safely in the rear, living the easy life of a general's wife. She's a princess, the legitimate daughter of a marquis. She doesn't have to lift a finger to get everything she wants. What about me? I have nothing. I only had you, but your heart was always hers." Tears streamed down Shen Wanru's face, yet she wore a cruel, triumphant grin. "So I made her wait. What's wrong with that? She's always going on about putting the greater good first, about being virtuous and understanding. Then she should have waited patiently. And those bugs, I only wanted to scare her, who knew she was so useless, so ready to die over a little fright." She suddenly turned to my parents and brother, her eyes blazing with maniacal fury. "So what if you're here? This is the general's mansion. Pei Zhiheng is the master here. How dare you touch me?" "Shut up," Pei Zhiheng roared, raising his hand and slapping Shen Wanru hard across the face. The force of the blow sent her head spinning to the side. Bright red finger marks bloomed instantly on her cheek. She clutched her face, staring at Pei Zhiheng in stunned disbelief. The look in Pei Zhiheng's eyes as he gazed at her was filled with nothing but disgust and bitter regret. You venomous woman. I was so blind, how could I ever have believed you? He spun around, dropping to his knees in front of my bed with a loud thud. He kowtowed to me repeatedly, his forehead banging against the floor, his voice breaking into sobs. I know I was wrong, I was stupid, I was blind and foolish. Please, save Ching Ching. Save our child. He kowtowed so hard that his forehead split open, blood trickling down his face, each thud a desperate plea for mercy. I turned my head away. Squeezing my eyes shut tightly, Mother popped a pill into my mouth, then rose slowly to her feet, her movements languid and unhurried. Now you realize you were wrong, General Pei. Her voice was soft and sweet, but her eyes were as cold as ice. Pei Zhiheng looked up at her, his eyes brimming with nothing but desperate hope. It's too late. Mother let out a cold, sharp laugh. My little grandson, he died the moment that old hag drove the first needle into my daughter's body. Pei Zhiheng's entire body went rigid, he jerked his head up, staring at me on the bed in horror. I felt it too, that faint, fluttering tug inside my belly. It had vanished completely a long time ago. #8. I opened my eyes, staring blankly at the top of the tent. The room was deathly quiet. Save for Pei Zhiheng's ragged, gasping breaths and Shen Wanru's muffled sobs, Father picked up his spear, striding over to Shen Jiang's crumpled form on the floor. She had woken up at some point, and was now shrinking back in terror, her eyes wide with fear. You seem to enjoy sticking needles into people, Father said, his voice as calm and casual as if he were commenting on the weather. Shen Jiang was trembling so violently she couldn't utter a single word. Father nodded. Gesturing to one of the soldiers standing guard at the door, the soldier immediately stepped forward, holding out a cloth pouch. Inside were all sorts of steel needles, thick and thin, long and short. I'm not much good at this delicate women's work, Father said, picking up a needle and twirling it between his fingers. But when it comes to torturing spies on the battlefield, I'm an expert. Shen Jiang let out a short, sharp scream of terror, her eyes rolled back in her head. And she tried to faint again, but the soldier was faster. He grabbed her roughly, forcing some kind of foul-tasting liquid down her throat. Shen Jiang was forced to stay awake, tears and snot streaming down her face, her body racked with uncontrollable terror. Don't pass out, Father said, his voice cold and unfeeling. You need to be awake to feel this. With that, he picked up the needle, and drove it straight into the space under her fingernail. The scream so shrill and inhuman it curdled the blood erupted from Shen Jiang's lips, echoing through the entire room. Pei Zhiheng squeezed his eyes shut, his body trembling slightly. Shen Wanru tried to lunge forward to save her mother, but the soldiers held her back, pinning her roughly in front of my brother. My brother smiled a sweet, innocent smile, pulling out his skinning knife. Your face skin looks quite good, he murmured, running the blade lightly over her cheek. Making her flinch violently, the sound of screams and sobs intertwined, filling the air with a sickening cacophony of pain and despair. Mother paid no attention to the chaos unfolding behind her. She sat back down beside my bed, taking my hand gently in hers. My poor little Qingying, she said softly, her voice as warm and soothing as it had been when I was a child, tucking me into bed. Mother knows you're hurting, the child is gone, but we can always have another. The man is gone. But we can always find you a better one. But this anger, this pain, Mother will help you get it all out. She leaned in closer, her lips brushing against my ear, her voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper. I recently obtained a new recipe. It uses the fresh heart blood of a living person, mixed with the juices of 7 rare poisonous flowers. It's called *** bone melting incense ***. When you light this incense, anyone who smells it will have their bones slowly turn to mush from the inside out, but they won't die. They'll just lie there, day after day, night after night, suffering the agony of 10,000 ants gnawing at their bones until their bodies finally melt into a puddle of slime. Would you like to try this incense on Pei Zhiheng and that little whore Shen Wanru? When she finished speaking, she pulled back, giving me a soft, encouraging smile. I turned my head to look at her. My eyes empty and cold, in the frozen, dead silence of my heart, Something dark and viscous was beginning to stir. Slowly, a faint smile tugged at the corners of my lips. I nodded gently at Mother. My throat was dry and parched. I forced the words out with great difficulty, my voice hoarse and low, calling out in the direction of my brother. Brother! My brother immediately turned to look at me, his eyes lighting up with interest. I stared at him, my gaze calm and steady, devoid of any emotion. You've been making human skin coats all these years. Do you still need any accessories to go with them? A bright spark of excitement flickered in my brother's eyes. He looked carefully at Shen Wanru, then at Pei Zhiheng, his head tilting to the side thoughtfully. After a moment, he shook his head slowly. Their skin is too poor quality, not worthy of being made into accessories. I nodded slowly, a brilliant, almost manic light beginning to burn in my eyes. I've heard that if you soak a human eye in a specially prepared medicinal liquid, it will turn as clear and glossy as a glazed bead. My brother froze for a second, then his gaze drifted to Shen Wanru's tear-filled eyes, his expression thoughtful. They are quite beautiful, aren't they? I hummed softly in agreement. Cut them out carefully. Later, we can string them together to make a necklace. My voice was light and casual, as if I were discussing nothing more than the weather. But the moment the words left my mouth, the room fell into a silence so deep, so absolute, it was as if even the air had frozen solid. This time, even Pei Zhiheng looked at me in stunned disbelief, as if he were seeing me for the very first time. Shen Wanru was so terrified she forgot how to cry. Her pupils shrank to the size of pinpricks, her face turning as white as a sheet. But Mother laughed, clapping her hands together in delight. Good, good, my precious daughter has finally grown up. # 9. I don't remember very clearly what happened after that. I only remember that the screams seemed to go on forever. Father grew bored with Xinjiang after a while, wandering off to patrol the general's mansion, looking for new trophies to add to his spear. Shen Wanru tried to run away, but my brother caught up to her easily, delivering a sharp blow to the back of her neck. She crumpled to the ground, unconscious. My brother picked her up, slinging her over his shoulder as he walked slowly toward the door, muttering to himself, "Eyes are always brighter when they're taken from a living person. I'll have to adjust the recipe for the soaking liquid." Pei Zhiheng remained kneeling on the floor the entire time, like a statue with its soul torn out. The blood on his forehead had long since dried and crusted over. His eyes were empty, filled with nothing but dead ash. Mother ordered the servants to carefully lift me onto a soft sedan chair, padded thickly with cushions to make me comfortable. Before we left, she walked over to Pei Zhiheng, squatting down in front of him. "General Pei," she said, her voice still soft and sweet, like honey dripping from her lips. "Do you remember? Once upon a time, our little Qingying was such a timid, frightened thing. She would faint at the sight of blood. She would have nightmares about the trophies her father hung on his spear. We tried everything to help her overcome her fears. We even asked other children her age to take her out to play." Pei Zhiheng turned his head to look at her stiffly, as if he already knew what she was going to say next. Mother let out a soft sigh. "It was you who knelt in front of our mansion, begging for the chance to take her out, begging us to trust you with her. It was you who knelt in front of us again, swearing that you would marry her and cherish her for the rest of your life. You know better than anyone, imperial edicts mean nothing to our family. We only agreed to let you marry her because we believed your promises. But it was also you," she continued, smiling gently, yet her eyes were cold and empty, devoid of any warmth, "who turned her into the person she is today." She stood up, holding out her hand, her palm open and empty. "We won't kill you today. Killing you would be too merciful. But you're right, you were blind and foolish. So you will give us your eyes as compensation for all the pain you've caused her." Pei Zhiheng's face turned deathly pale. He raised his trembling hand, his fingers hovering over his eye, his body shaking violently with terror. Mother sighed softly, a sound of disappointment. Pei Zhiheng let out a choked sob, then gritted his teeth and dug his fingers into his eye socket. He let out a scream of agonizing pain, collapsing to the floor as his eyeball rolled out of its socket. Landing with a soft plop on the ground, he didn't stop. He forced himself to repeat the unspeakable act with his other eye. The pain was so unbearable that he crumpled to the floor, his body convulsing, unable to utter a single word. Both of his eyeballs lay on the floor at his feet, staring blankly up at the ceiling. Mother smiled a gentle, satisfied smile. We'll accept this compensation. Now you can live to experience the agony of betrayal by everyone you once trusted. Live to taste the bitterness of falling from the heights of glory into the depths of the mud. Live, so that one day, if our little Chingying or any of us should happen to remember you, we can come back to play with you again. Pei Zhiheng lay crumpled on the floor, writhing in agony, unable to say a single word in response. Mother turned around gracefully, humming a cheerful little tune under her breath as she stepped over the two glistening eyeballs on the floor. She walked over to my sedan chair, tucking the fur cloak around me gently, her touch filled with tender affection. "Let's go home, my precious baby," she said, her voice warm and bright. "Mother is taking you home." Behind us, a hoarse, desperate cry rang out, calling my name over and over again. I did not look back. The wind at Jio Pass was still as cold as ever, carrying gritty sand that stung my face, but I no longer felt the pain. The child was gone. The young man who had once lit up my entire world had also died today. No, perhaps he had died a long time ago, the moment he first chose to indulge Shen Wanru's lies. It was just as well. The sedan chair glided forward smoothly. Mother held my hand, murmuring softly beside me. Her words were a blur, something about refining the recipe for the bone-melting incense, and something else about a new fabric just arrived at a shop in the capital. I listened, nodding occasionally, yet my mind wandered. Fixated on a single thought: what would brother make of those glazed eyeballs? Would they feel cold against my neck?